ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar. Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Ghana's President Mahama embarks on a two-nation tour in West Africa to strengthen bilateral cooperation. Ministers of Finance of the Alliance of Sahel State AES meet with Army Chief Assimi Goïta to fast-track the region's development agenda. Human Rights Watch laments the failure to hold right violators accountable in the face of rising insecurity.
2024 revealed many failures. Governments worldwide were called to act in line with their obligations on human rights, and many failed.
And the court in Lomé postpones the trial of the Trading Gate case, a large-scale alleged fraud operation, to February 13, 2025. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners within and outside the sub-region. President John Mahama today, Friday, arrived in Banjul for a day's working visit. Mahama was scheduled to use the day to discuss various cooperation and business opportunities between the two countries. President John Mahama's trip to the Gambia marks his first official trip outside Ghana since becoming head of state on January 7, 2025. Sankule Janko has more.
President Mahama, who was recently sworn in following his re-election as president in December 2024, will hold bilateral talks with President Barrow to enhance cooperation. The visit to the Gambia is Mahama's first official trip abroad since his inauguration. The one-day working visit is expected to further strengthen bilateral ties between Banjul and Accra. Discussions by Barrow and Mahama will focus on socio-economic development of the two countries. The two leaders are also expected to discuss Ghanaian contingent deployed as part of the ECOWAS troops stationed in the North Bank region of the country. The Ghanaian contingent is arguably the most popular force thanks to its close relations with various communities in the North Bank region. The Gambia and Ghana have enjoyed fruitful relations over the years. There is a handful of Ghanaian presence in the Gambia, many of whom are residents of Ghana Town, a settlement about 40 kilometers south of the capital, Banjul. Meanwhile, President Mahama will end his state visit at a state dinner to be hosted by President Adama Barrow at the home of the presidency in Banjul. For Newslink and West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Sankule Janko reporting from Banjul.
Meanwhile, Ghana's president has described the exit of the three Saharan countries from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, as a temporary setback. Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger are set to exit the sub-regional body on January 29, a year after the countries announced their intentions to leave. They, however, will have a 6-month grace period following their exit, which the bloc hopes to use to convince the countries to return. John Mahama is urging the maintenance of strong ties with the three countries and expressing hope for a resolution to restore the bloc's unity. From Accra.
On January 15, 2025, Malian Prime Minister Abdoulaye Maiga arrived in Accra for an official visit, carrying a special message from Mali's transitional president and head of state, General Assimi Goïta. The visit aimed to engage in high-level talks with President John Dramani Mahama, focusing on strengthening bilateral agreements between Ghana and Mali. Discussions were expected to address key areas of mutual interest, including trade, security, and regional cooperation. Speaking to the media after their meeting on Thursday, Mali's Prime Minister, General Abdoulaye Maiga, highlighted the shared commitment to Pan-Africanism and genuine sovereignty, commending President Mahama on his vision and solidarity.
We commend the spirit of brotherhood and solidarity of His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama. Additionally, we assure him that the fight for Pan-Africanism is being actively pursued by His Excellency General Assimi Goïta, President of Mali. This struggle is also being advanced within the framework of the Confederation of Sahel States, in close collaboration with His Excellency Captain Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso, and Brigadier General Abdurrahman Chani, President of Niger. The objective is clear: to genuinely fight for true sovereignty, I believe this objective aligns with the vision of His Excellency President John Dramani Mahama.
Vision de Son Excellence le Président John Dramani Mahama.
President Mahama, in turn, described the recent withdrawal of the 3 Sahelian countries from ECOWAS as a temporary setback. He stressed the importance of maintaining strong ties with these nations and expressed optimism about resolving differences to restore unity within the bloc.
We have noted the sovereign decisions of not only Mali but Burkina Faso and Niger to form a separate confederation. But despite that, God put us together in this sub-region for a purpose. And so we continue to intermarry, we continue to trade, we continue to have relationships that go beyond our individual countries. And so we must recognize those. And despite temporary setback that we're facing, we must continue to keep our relationships strong. And I believe that eventually we'll be able to integrate ourselves again as one body.
Both leaders underscored the significance of free trade and the seamless movement of people between Ghana and Mali. They reaffirmed their shared commitment to fostering unity and development in the region, even amid ongoing challenges. For WADR, Nadidi Tete, Accra.
Well away from Ghana, now to the Sahel, Mali's transitional president and chairperson of the AES, Army Chief Assimi Goïta, met with the ministers in charge of the development pillar of the Confederation. This meeting is part of the implementation of the roadmap adopted by the heads of state of the Sahel Alliance last June in Niamey. The creation of a regional investment bank intended to support the economic development and infrastructure of member countries was widely discussed. Christopher Ticho reports.
Experts from Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger have already begun preparatory work to establish the foundations of the new financial institution. Nakanabu Abubakar, Burkinabe Minister of Economy, Finance and Foresight, stressed that the Alliance of Sahel States is based on 3 fundamental pillars. These are defense, diplomacy and development. During the meeting that runs until Saturday in Bamako, experts from Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger will concretize the actions to define the AES roadmap, particularly for the development pillars. However, the meeting between the minister and the president of the Confederation, General Assimi Goïta, provided clear instructions to accelerate the implementation of concrete actions for the development of the populations of the region. This initiative is in line with the efforts made since the creation of the Alliance of Sahel States in September 2023, aimed at strengthening cooperation between Bamako, Ouagadougou and Niamey. The realization of these ambitious projects demonstrates the desire of the juntas to promote sustainable socio-economic development and strengthen their sovereignty in the face of regional challenges.
Christopher Ticho reporting there.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Remember, we stream live on wadr.org, on Facebook, WADR English Service. Talking on security, the Nigerian military has said it will intensify and strengthen the anti-terrorism campaign in the northeast region of the country. Faced with violent extremism, the Nigerian army claims that the surging insurgency in the region is bolstered by foreign fighters and local collaborators. A spokesperson for the Defense Headquarters disclosed during a press briefing in Abuja on Thursday that recent attacks in Borno State were linked to the influx of foreign agents from the Sahel region. According to Major General Edward Buba, these armed men are strengthening Boko Haram and its affiliated groups.
This situation is made worse by local collaborators that form a support base for these terrorists. They serve as informants reporting on troops' movement to the terrorists. However, in spite of this situation, troops are profoundly conscious of their role and responsibility in ending insurgency and terrorism across our nation. Though we might record occasional tactical setbacks, our strategic objective remains unhindered, and it is to break the terrorist will to fight.
Meanwhile, Nigerian Energy Minister Adebayo Adelabu has urged security forces to step up efforts to protect electricity infrastructure which has been targeted by increasing vandalism, jeopardizing the national grid. The minister has also called on security agents to redouble their efforts to protect the country's power infrastructure, especially in the face of the growing threats of vandalism. Presenting the ministry's budget before the National Assembly in Abuja, Adelabu stressed the critical importance of thorough sensitization to combat acts of vandalism that have severely impacted the country's power sector. He highlighted the interconnectedness of the power transmission system, stressing that damage to a single component has widespread repercussions across the entire network. He also clarified that the challenge was not limited to mere theft, with criminal elements, including bandits, using sophisticated methods such as dynamite to destroy vital towers and transmission lines. Here in Senegal, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye presided over the formal opening of the courts and tribunals. The discussions on Thursday focused on major reforms in the justice system and the supervision of the rights to strike. During the discussion, the Senegalese head of state announced legal reforms aimed at clarifying the conditions under which this right can be exercised in strategic sectors. However, can the Senegalese state strengthen social dialogue amid the rights to strike? Alioune Fall is a Labour and Social Security Inspector and head of the Negotiations and Professional Relations Division at the Ministry of Works in Senegal.
We can think that the right to strike and social conflicts can be better regulated, and in this case, we must put the cursor on alternative conflict resolution mechanisms. So, I spoke earlier about conciliation, and among these mechanisms, we have mediation and arbitration. So, arbitration and mediation are two mechanisms that make it possible to avoid social conflicts by proposing alternative conflict resolution mechanisms. I think that we need to move towards what is called strengthening social dialogue. The President of the Republic has proposed a social rebasing, that is, having a much more sophisticated social dialogue mechanism by trying to establish a framework for debate or consultation between social partners. We need to move towards signing a social stability pact, and I think that in this pact we can redefine the contours of our social dialogue system.
Alioune Fall is a Labour and Social Security Inspector and head of the Negotiations and Professional Relations Division at the Ministry of Works in Senegal. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal, and online on wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Ghana's President Mahama embarks on a two-nation tour in West Africa to strengthen bilateral cooperation. Ministers of Finance of the Alliance of Sahel States AES meet with Army Chief Assimi Goïta to fast-track the region's development agenda. Still ahead in the news, Human Rights Watch laments the failure to hold right violators accountable in the face of rising insecurity. A court in Lomé postpones the trial of the Trading Gate case, a large-scale alleged fraud operation, to February 13. We also have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Many thanks for staying with us. Now, Human Rights Watch in its World Report 2025 highlights global human rights violations and related issues. The report, titled A Year of Reckoning, examines the human rights situation in over 100 countries from the past year. During a virtual press conference, panelists discussed the renewed armed conflict between the Israeli government and Hamas, as well as ongoing conflicts in Ukraine, Sudan, Haiti, Syria, and the Sahel. They provided recommendations for improving the protection and promotion of human rights. Tirana Hassan is Executive Director of Human Rights Watch.
2024 revealed many failures, but it actually also saw inspiring acts of resilience in defense of human rights. Governments worldwide were called to act in line with their obligations on human rights, democracy, and humanitarian action, and many failed. In China, Russia, and Venezuela, repression actually intensified. The conflicts in Gaza, Sudan, and Ukraine brought devastating human costs, again showing how fragile international norms are when they are not backed up by political will. The vital role of civil society and journalists in holding truth to power and to make governments accountable to the people that they're supposed to serve. Protecting freedom of expression and independent media remains a priority, even as authoritarian regimes work to silence dissent under all of their regimes. In country after country, we see defenders and organizations who are pushing back against unchecked power of real and want-to-be autocrats being shut down, disappeared, surveilled, and arrested.
Tirana Hassan, the Executive Director of Human Rights Watch, speaking there. Let's now take you to Togo, where the trial in the Trading Gate case, a large-scale alleged fraud operation, has been postponed to February 13, 2025. The trial initially began on January 15 in Lomé, the nation's capital. Many victims attended, seeking a reimbursement of their capital. More details with Echi Atisu.
The case dates back to 2021. Several trading company officials have been in custody since then. The Togolese justice system accuses them of illegal activities. They are charged with involvement in a large-scale fraud operation that has affected thousands of savers and investors, with estimated damages amounting to several billion CFA francs. 13 individuals, mostly officials of illegal investment companies in Togo or their collaborators, are in the dock, while 20 others remain at large. On the day of the trial, the victims appeared seeking reimbursement of their capital and potential compensation. According to the president of the Victims Collective, her organization alone represents 3,000 people who have lost 5 billion CFA francs. In 2021, the victims, including workers, civil servants, executives, and military personnel, believed in promises of returns of 50%, 100%, or even 300% after depositing a certain amount of money. Today, according to the Victims Collective, many of them have become ill, indebted, or separated due to lack of money.
A report voiced by Echi Atisu. More on legal matters. The trial of Liberian warlord Lai Sekou Kamara, alias K1 or Dragon Master in the U.S., has been called off after he pleaded guilty to criminal immigration fraud charges. A former commander of a rebel group, Kamara 46, was due to go on trial on January 21 in a U.S. district court in the state of Philadelphia on a range of charges, including lying that he had never served in or been a member of a rebel group or insurgent organization. All 17 Liberian witnesses against him are currently in the U.S., having flown from Liberia, but they will not get a chance to testify against him for his war-related crimes, which he has admitted to committing. However, some activists celebrated Kamara's decision. The former warlord plea bargain was entered during a pre-trial conference, a gathering involving prosecution and defense lawyers before the start of a trial. Lai Sekou Kamara faced 40 years in jail and a fine of $250,000 had he been found guilty of the charges. His action now leaves the judge with the only option of sentencing him, an action expected to be taken in May this year.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
The guest segment tonight focuses on discussions about major reforms in the justice system of Senegal and the supervision of the right to strike. Recall on Thursday, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye presided over the formal opening of the court and tribunals. During the discussions, the Senegalese head of state announced legal reforms aimed at clarifying the conditions under which this right can be enjoyed in strategic sectors. However, the question remains if Senegalese state can strengthen social dialogue and the right to strike. Our guest is Aliou Fall, a labor and social security inspector, who is also the head of the negotiations department at the Ministry of Works in Senegal.
Je pense que le président de la République a plutôt rappelé.
I think that the President of the Republic rather recalled that the right to strike is regulated in Senegal. The right to strike is not only regulated, but there are mechanisms that have been put in place by the regulations to find alternatives to conflict. I will give an example. First, before issuing a strike order, the regulations require that certain procedures be respected. So, these procedures that allow conflict to be resolved before strikes. So, there is a mechanism for preventing conflict in the first instance, and now, if this prevention is not possible, it is at this point that the strike can be a tool for organizing the showdown between the employer and the worker. So, what we need to remember is that under the labor code, if a group of people, unions or staff representatives decide to go on strike or notice a conflict, they must first inform the labor inspector or the general director of labor and social security. The latter tries to play good officers, tries to reconcile the parties. If a solution is not found following this attempt at reconciliation, workers who notice a business problem can, in this case, file a 30 days strike notice. So, at the end of these 30 days, if no solution is found, at this time, we can only declare that we can say that the strike is lawful. Now, as the President of the Republic said, the strike must not prevent the community of certain services, especially if they are basic social services.
Continuité de certains services, surtout si c'est des services sociaux de base.
The Senegalese head of state also spoke out on the reform of the labor code. How can we ensure that all stakeholders are satisfied once these reforms have been made?
Oui, je pense que le président faisait allusion.
Yes, I think that the president was referring to the reforms of the labor code that is underway because, as you know, you think that the right to strike and social conflict can be better regulated. And in this case, we must focus on alternative conflict resolution mechanisms. So, I speak earlier about reconciliation, and among these mechanisms, we have mediation and arbitration. Arbitration and mediation are two mechanisms that make it possible to avoid social conflict by proposing alternative conflict resolution mechanisms. And I think that these are mechanisms that will be at the forefront of the reform of the labor code. Social dialogue will be initiated between employers, workers, and the Senegalese state, which Bassirou Diomaye Faye announced when we know that this framework for dialogue has always existed. But despite this, disputes between parties are still a reality.
Ce sont des mécanismes qui seront en vedette dans le cadre de la réforme du Code du travail.
In your opinion, what new things need to be brought in to solve the problems?
Je pense qu'il faut qu'on se dirige vers ce qu'on appelle le renforcement du dialogue social.
I think we need to move towards what is called strengthening social dialogue. The President of the Republic proposed a social rebasing, i.e., having a much more sophisticated social dialogue mechanism by trying to establish a framework for debate or consultation between the social partners. We need to move towards signing a social stability pact, and I think that in this pact, we can redefine the contours of our social dialogue system.
Je pense que dans ce pacte-là, on peut redéfinir les contours de notre système de dialogue social.
He also mentioned solutions such as strengthening mediation and arbitration mechanisms, points that you raised earlier. Are these points on their own enough to guarantee stability in the labor sector?
Alors, la stabilité dans le secteur du travail, c'est...
So stability in the labor system is at least two things. The first is to try to do everything possible to ensure that the regulations are respected so that there are already laws that are effective and that there is a labor administration that has the necessary powers to try to ensure compliance with the law. That is the first thing. The second thing is now, even if we have a labor law, we have a labor inspection. Nevertheless, there will come a day when someone will violate the law. And in this case, what should we do? Should we go to contention? Maybe. But before going to contention, we must propose mechanisms that can bring two parties together, try to find a gentle solution, an alternative solution to the conflict.
Une solution douce, une solution alternative au conflit.
It was listened to Ali Fall, a labor and social security inspector who also heads the negotiations and professional relations division at the Senegalese Ministry of Works. Up next is Sport News with Sankule Janko.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. The International Olympic Committee IOC confirmed that it will change defective medals of the 2024 Paris Olympics. The IOC says it will replace the said medals in the coming weeks. This comes after 100 athletes show the deterioration of their medals won at the Paris Olympics. The Paris 2024 Olympic Games Organizing Committee is working closely with the Monarch de Paris, the institution responsible for the manufacture and quality control of the medals, to assess any complaints about the medals and to understand the circumstances and cause of any damage, the IOC said in a statement. It further states the defective medals will be systematically replaced by the Monarch de Paris and engraved identically. The replacement process should begin in the coming weeks, the statement reads. And in football, Ivory Coast international Amad Diallo came to Manchester United's rescue as he scored a hat-trick against Southampton in the English Premier League on Thursday evening. Diallo led United to a comeback, having gone from behind against the bottom team. Southampton took the lead after Emmanuel Ogate own goal in the first half. As United headed for an embarrassing defeat, the Ivorian Diallo turned the game on its head with his individual brilliance. He netted the equalizer in the 81st minute to give United a lifeline. Moments later, Ahmad scored a sublime volley to give United the lead before pouncing on a defensive error to complete his hat-trick in 12 thrilling minutes. The Ivorian Diallo is the second youngest Manchester United player to score a hat-trick after club legend Wayne Rooney. Surely, Diallo will remember this day for the rest of his life. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Maojo Juf and Umu Daniogo for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR News, on Facebook, WADR English Service, and stream live on WADR.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is Inti Sahel, WADR's Security and Governance Program, to be followed at top of the hour at 7 p.m. by the news in brief in French, that is with Demba Amaran. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.